Every family has its secrets. Mine has a ritual. A horrifying tradition my powerful narcissistic father calls the reckoning. It's a ceremony of public humiliation designed to break his children and bind them to him forever. With my 30th birthday approaching, I was next in line. I was ready to run, to disappear, but a late-night drive and a random podcast changed everything. The voice on the podcast revealed a secret that gave me the power to turn my father's cruelest weapon against him. This is a true story of psychological abuse and the ultimate revenge. Listen to my story to discover the shocking truth I uncovered, and how I orchestrated a downfall so perfect, so complete, that no one saw it coming. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch! The silence in my father's house isn't peaceful, it's a presence. It has weight. It's the sound of unspoken truths and carefully curated lies, and it presses down on you from the moment you walk through the massive oak doors. I hadn't set foot in this sprawling Charlotte, North Carolina mansion in 5 years, but after my mother's death last month, I didn't have a choice. Now, sitting in a leather chair that cost more than my car, the silence was broken by the one voice I had spent my adult life trying to escape. "Your 30th birthday is in 3 weeks, Liam," my father, Marcus, said. He didn't look up from the crystal glass of whiskey he was swirling. "We'll hold the reckoning that Saturday." My blood turned to ice water. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an invitation. It was a royal decree. I could feel the old panic, the familiar tightening in my chest that was a hallmark of my childhood. I'm a graphic designer. I build worlds out of color and code, controlled environments where I make the rules. But in this house I was 10 years old again, powerless and suffocating. "I'm not doing it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He finally looked at me, his eyes the same shade of cold, unforgiving gray as a winter sky. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a father. He was the titan of the Charlotte real estate world, a man who built his empire on a charming smile and a ruthless heart. He saw people not as human beings, but as assets or liabilities, even his own children. "Don't be dramatic," he said, his voice laced with that infuriating, patronizing calm. "Your brother went through it, your sister went through it. It's a tradition. It's what we do. It's how this family stays strong." Strong. That was his word for it. To the outside world, the reckoning was a lavish 30th birthday party where Marcus, the benevolent patriarch, gifted his child a significant financial foundation to secure their future. $1 million to be exact. But I knew the truth. It wasn't a gift, it was a transaction. It was the most horrifying tradition a family could possibly have. The party was a trial. In front of our extended family and my father's most influential business partners, he would stand at a podium and deliver a speech, a meticulous, soul-crushing dissection of your life up to that point. He'd frame your every misstep, every youthful mistake, every personal vulnerability not as a part of growing up, but as a catastrophic failure. He'd paint you as a broken, directionless mess that he, in his infinite wisdom and generosity, was going to save. The gaslighting was so complete, so masterfully performed, that by the end, you almost believed him. You felt worthless. And then he'd present the check, $1 million. But accepting it meant accepting his narrative. It meant you were forever indebted, forever his failed project that he had graciously bailed out. You were his. It was the ultimate demonstration of his power, a trauma bond forged in public humiliation and sealed with cash. My older sister Chloe took the deal 8 years ago. She's now a gallery owner in Charleston, a gallery funded and controlled by my father. She's a ghost in expensive clothes, her spark completely extinguished. My older brother, Ethan, took the deal 5 years ago. He was the golden boy, a VP at my father's company. He seemed to thrive, to have beaten the system from within. But I saw the hollowness in his eyes, the same look our mother had before she finally succumbed to the cancer that had been eating away at her for years. A disease I was convinced was hastened by a lifetime of living with a narcissist. "Dad, I have my own life, a career. I don't need. You're a freelance designer living in a one-bedroom apartment in Raleigh," he cut in, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You make trinkets on a computer. That isn't a career, it's a hobby. Your mother, God rest her soul, she worried about you constantly. She would have wanted you to have security. She would have wanted this." The cognitive dissonance hit me like a physical blow. He was twisting the memory of my gentle, supportive mother into a weapon to use against me. The woman who secretly sent me money when I was starting out, who called me every Sunday and told me how proud she was. He was erasing her and replacing her with his own fictional character, one who would approve of his cruelty. I fled the house that night, driving aimlessly through the dark, winding roads outside the city, the windows down, the cold air failing to clear my head. I needed a distraction, any voice other than the one in my own mind. I put on a random podcast, something from the business charts called The Founder's Fallacy. The host's voice was deep, digitally altered to be anonymous, but his words were sharp and articulate. He talked about narcissistic CEOs and the toxic savior complex that poisons their companies and their families. It was like he was narrating my life. And the most insidious tool of the corporate narcissist, the voice said, is the illusion of benevolence. They'll create a crisis, or simply frame your independence as a crisis, and then swoop in to save you. They don't want you to succeed. They want you to be perpetually grateful. They'll give you a golden parachute, but it's attached to a leash. I was captivated. This anonymous host understood. He got it. He was putting words to the formless dread I had felt my whole life. I drove for 2 hours, just listening, episode after episode. He told stories of different founders, using allegories and changing names, but the patterns were always the same: control, manipulation, the erosion of self-worth. I was about to turn back toward my cheap motel when he started the next segment. "Let's talk about family traditions," the host said, his voice taking on a new, more personal edge. "Sometimes these toxic traits are formalized. They're given a name, a ceremony. Let me tell you about a man I know. We'll call him the king. Every time one of the king's children reaches a certain age, he holds a feast. And at this feast, he doesn't celebrate the child. He eviscerates them, and he does it with a smile on his face. He reminds them of every failure. I remember when my little brother was 10, we built a model rocket. It was our masterpiece. The day of the launch, the king helped us. He over-tightened a screw and cracked the fuselage. When it fell apart on the launch pad, he didn't comfort us. He put his hand on my brother's shoulder and said, 'See, son? This is what happens when you don't pay attention to the details.' He manufactured the failure, then used it as a life lesson. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop on the gravel shoulder. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The model rocket. The cracked fuselage. The words, 'See, son. This is what happens when you don't pay attention to the details.' That was not a story I had ever told anyone. It was a memory I had buried deep. A moment of stinging, private shame. Only 3 people on earth knew that story. Me, my father, and my brother, Ethan. The blood drained from my face. I looked at the podcast logo on my car's display, The Founder's Fallacy. I rewound the last 30 seconds and listened again, filtering out the digital distortion, focusing on the cadence, the slight hesitation before the word brother. It was him. It was Ethan. My brother, the golden boy, the compliant vice president, the one who told me to just get it over with, was the anonymous host of a whistleblower podcast dedicated to exposing men exactly like our father. He hadn't surrendered. He had gone deep undercover, and I had been about to run, to leave him all alone in the belly of the beast. My plan changed in that instant. I wasn't going to run from the reckoning. I was going to arm myself for it. And I had just discovered the perfect weapon. The next day, I drove to the address of a sterile corporate office park where Thorn Development headquarters stood like a monument to my father's ego. I found Ethan in his corner office, a space with a panoramic view of the city he was supposed to one day inherit. He looked up when I walked in, his perfectly composed mask of polite surprise firmly in place. "Liam, what are you doing here? What are you doing here?" he asked, standing up from behind his massive mahogany desk. I closed the door behind me, my heart pounding. I held up my phone, the screen showing the logo for the Founder's Fallacy. I didn't say a word. I just watched his face. For a moment he was perfectly still, his eyes darting from my phone to my face. The polished veneer of the golden boy cracked, and for the first time in years, I saw my actual brother. Fear, raw and undisguised, flashed in his eyes before he quickly replaced it with a weary resignation. He sank back into his chair and let out a long, slow breath. "How did you know?" "The model rocket," I said, my voice hoarse. "You told the story of the model rocket." A sad smile touched his lips. "I wondered if you'd remember that. I needed to know if you were still in there." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Sit down, Liam. Please." For the next hour, the truth I had always sensed but never been able to prove came pouring out. 5 years ago, at his own reckoning, Ethan had been on the verge of telling our father to go to hell. But then he saw the look on our mother's face. She was already sick, and he knew the fallout from his defiance would destroy her, so he played the part. He accepted the money and the job, letting our father believe he'd won. He became the perfect, codependent son. But it was a long con. He started the podcast a year later, a secret outlet, a way to fight back without my father ever knowing. He funneled his research into the episodes, exposing the tactics of corporate psychopaths, all while documenting our father's every move, every unethical deal, every moment of psychological abuse. He was building a case, waiting for the right moment to burn the whole kingdom to the ground. "I took his money, Liam," Ethan said, his voice filled with a self-loathing I knew all too well. "I used it to hire a private investigator, a forensic accountant. I've been feeding their findings to journalists for years, all anonymously. The only thing I couldn't expose was him, not by name." "He's too careful. His public image is ironclad. I needed something that couldn't be denied. Something that happened in a room full of witnesses." I looked at him, the plan already taking shape in my mind. "The reckoning," I said, "my reckoning." His eyes met mine, and for the first time since we were kids, we were truly allies. "It's too much to ask of you," he said, "to stand there and let him do that to you." You've been standing there for 5 years," I countered. "It's my turn to fight. But we're not just going to refuse him. We're going to do what he does. We're going to use a public ceremony to destroy a reputation." The next 3 weeks were a blur of covert operations. Ethan and I met in secret, using encrypted messaging apps and burner phones. He gave me a dossier, a complete psychological profile of our father, his deepest vanities, his greatest fears. His biggest fear, public irrelevance. Being seen as a fraud. We didn't want to just hurt him, we wanted to dismantle the myth of Marcus Thorne. Our plan was simple, and that was the beauty of it. It used my father's own tradition, his own stage, and his own audience against him. The night of the reckoning arrived. The ballroom at my father's country club was filled with 100 of Charlotte's most powerful people. They were all there to watch the show, to see the great Marcus Thorne perform his famous act of paternal benevolence. I stood beside him on the stage, my heart hammering, but for the first time it wasn't from fear, it was from adrenaline. My father stepped to the podium, a warm, charming smile on his face. "My friends," he began, "we are here to celebrate my youngest son Liam, a talented boy, an artist. But the world can be a difficult place for an artist." He began the slow, methodical character assassination, just as I knew he would. He painted my independence as aimlessness, my creativity as a lack of focus, my quiet nature as a weakness. I stood there and took it, keeping my expression neutral, my eyes fixed on a point at the back of the room. I could feel the pity from the audience. It was working perfectly. "And that is why," he concluded, his voice swelling with false emotion, "with the love a father has for his son, I want to provide him with a foundation, a chance to build a real life, $1 million to guide him toward a more stable future." He turned to me, holding out a ceremonial oversized check. The room burst into applause. This was my cue. I stepped to the podium, taking the microphone from its stand. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the silent ballroom. "Thank you for that performance, and thank you for this generous gift. But I've learned recently that the most valuable inheritances aren't always money." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the ballroom's Bluetooth sound system. "My brother Ethan couldn't be here tonight," I said. "He's unwell. But he asked me to play something for you all. It's from his favorite podcast." I pressed play. Ethan's digitally altered voice filled the room, but the audio was from a new, unreleased episode. "Let's talk about the king's final feast," the voice boomed. "The one for his youngest son. The king believes this will be his ultimate victory, but he doesn't know that his entire kingdom is a house of cards. He doesn't know about the offshore accounts, the illegal union busting, the fraudulent zoning variances." The voice listed 3 specific illegal real estate deals, with dates and details only an insider could know. A gasp rippled through the audience as men in the room exchanged panicked looks. Then, the digital distortion on the voice faded away, leaving Ethan's real voice, raw and clear. My name is Ethan Thorne. And, the king, is my father, Marcus Thorne. For 5 years I have been your loyal son, but tonight that ends. The generosity you're witnessing is a lie. It is a tool of control, wielded by a narcissist who is terrified of his children being free. My father's face had gone from confusion to fury to a ghastly pale white. He lunged for the microphone, but I held it firm. It's true, I said, my own voice ringing with a strength I never knew I possessed. All of it. This tradition isn't about family, it's about fear. But we are not afraid anymore. I looked down at the check in my hand. We don't want your money, Dad. My sister Chloe doesn't want it either. The three of us have already spoken. We're using our inheritance from Mom, the money you couldn't touch, to start a foundation for people escaping abusive families. Your legacy won't be in buildings. It will be in the lives you ruined. Then I tore the oversized check in half. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a myth shattering. My father stood there exposed and mute, his power gone, his audience staring at him not with admiration, but with contempt and fear for their own complicity. We walked out of that ballroom and never looked back. The aftermath was swift and brutal. And SEC investigation was launched the next week, triggered by a dozen anonymous tips from his former associates. My father's empire crumbled, but we were already gone. Chloe, Ethan and I are closer than we've ever been. We're building something new, something real. There are still scars, of course. A lifetime of psychological warfare doesn't vanish overnight. But we are free. We learned the hard way that family isn't about the blood you share. It's about the people who are willing to stand with you, tear up the check, and walk into the fire by your side.